A single drop of clear moisture detached from the human's chin and fell toward the deck plating. Upon contact with the floor coolant coating, it did not splash. Instead, it evaporated instantly with a sharp, high-frequency hiss. A sound that triggered an immediate chemical leak alarm on the engineering bridge. The bridge of the heavy cruiser Aegis hummed at a precise, stabilized 12 degrees Celsius. For the Meridi, this is the gold standard of operational comfort. Our proteins are stable, and the ship systems remain in perfect thermal balance. Anything higher than 20 degrees induces cellular stress. I stood on the bridge, watching the surveillance monitors as they tracked a walking anomaly in the lower decks. I'll be honest with you, what I saw on those monitors that day forced me to rewrite every law of biology I ever learned. Callum, the contracted welder from Earth, was zipping his heavy, lead-lined insulated jacket all the way to his chin. He adjusted the seal of his collar, his movements appearing sluggish to our sensors. To our bridge crew, it looked like a desperate act of preservation. He was retreating into his layers. He looked like a wounded being seeking shelter from the bite of the air. The surveillance overlay tracked his thermal signature in real time. It was a jagged orb of white-hot intensity against the cool blue of the corridor. Near his feet sat a small, cylindrical object made of brushed steel. It was his thermal flask. Our sensors flagged it as a high-density heat source, sitting at a steady 50 degrees. To a Meridi, that flask was a thermal bomb. If the casing cracked, the liquid inside would scald the deck and trigger a ship-wide evacuation. "Engineer Callum," I said, my voice echoing through the bridge's intercom. "Medical teams are being deployed to Sector 4. Cease all physical activity immediately." Callum paused, his hand hovering over a secondary plasma conduit. He lifted his welding visor. His skin was a dark, flushed red that signaled catastrophic failure to any Meridi observer. "I'm all right, Commander," he said, his voice carrying a heavy, rhythmic resonance. "The seals are just taking longer to set in this draft. If you could just kill the floor vents for 10 minutes, I'd have this wrapped up." His request was irrational. Killing the vents would allow the ambient temperature to drift upward, threatening the structural integrity of the Meridi technicians in the adjacent bays. I watched the biometric overlay on the main monitor. His heartbeat registered as a violent, heavy pulse. Thump, thump, thump. That vibrated through the deck sensors. Each beat sent a massive bloom of energy radiating out from his chest. A thermal tide that shouldn't exist. Which meant, or perhaps my tactical processors simply failed, the readings were implying he was a self-sustaining furnace. My tactical officer, a young Meridi named Kale, leaned over his console. His secondary gills flared in a sign of intense agitation. He pointed to the infrared readout where the human's hands were currently touching the plasma line. The metal was beginning to glow, not from the plasma inside, but from the heat of the human's grip. "He is not in danger of freezing, Commander," Kale whispered, his voice trembling. "His internal core is actively fighting our environment. He is absorbing the cold and replacing it with raw, biological heat." I ran the preliminary mathematics. A biological organism actively heating itself, not relying on the environment. A walking, self-sustaining forge. We had assumed he was wearing that heavy jacket to keep the heat in. The realization hit the bridge with the weight of a physical blow. He wasn't wearing it to stay warm. He was wearing it to protect the ship from his presence. "Engineer," I pressed, my tone tightening with professional anxiety. "Our sensors indicate your core is operating at a fatal thermal threshold. Define your baseline operating temperature." Callum lowered his welding visor. He adjusted the grip on his plasma torch, leaning casually against the bulkhead. The surveillance microphone picked up his voice perfectly. 37 degrees, he whispered. The bridge of the Aegis fell into a silence so absolute, or perhaps my internal audio sensors were simply overwhelmed, that the microscopic whine of the coolant pumps felt like a scream. Callum unscrewed the cap of his steel flask. He took a long, steady swallow of the 50-degree liquid, then wiped his mouth with the back of a gloved hand, muttering that his tea was already getting lukewarm. The thermal sensors in Sector 4 transitioned from yellow to a screaming, incandescent red. Level 1. The local insulation began melting. Level 2 alarms followed as our primary cooling grid, designed to handle the passive heat of 500 meridi, hit 98% saturation just trying to neutralize the space around one human. Finally, the Level 3 cascade hit. The synaptic core stuttered as its temperature-sensitive graviton buffers interpreted Callum's thermal bleed as a catastrophic plasma breach. Kale, our youngest tactical officer at only 20 cycles, dropped his data stylus, the clatter against the metal floor sounding like a gunshot. His blood is hot enough to denature our proteins on contact, he whispered. The biological reality was a physical weight on the bridge. Humans are not passive recipients of their environment. They are walking, self-sustaining furnaces of Class 12 Death World origin. To maintain 37 degrees in our 12-degree air, his body was consuming caloric fuel at a rate that would incinerate a Meridi's internal organs in seconds. The Aegis died. The transition from the hum of power to the hollow, echoing silence of emergency batteries was a physical sensation, like a heart stopping. Across the engineering bridge, the monitors flickered to a low-energy amber, casting long, sickly shadows across the faces of my crew. We were drifting in the lightless void of Sector 9, a billion-ton warship paralyzed because a single biological organism refused to stop radiating the heat of a small sun. I have filed the report with Fleet Command. Callum remains at his post, an unintentional hazard in a jacket. He offered to help reboot the core. I formally declined. We are currently recalculating our entire operational doctrine around a single 37-degree